influence starts way before you need something. Next time you hear something that they say, or you like the way they've said something, you're going to write them a quick email and you're going to say, I really loved what you said there. So I'm going to see if I can apply it this week. Thanks again for your presentation. Best regards. That's all you need to do.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very, very much as always for taking the time to tune in. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by communication strategist and award-winning comedy script writer, Frankie Kemp, who is here to discuss visibility, leadership communication, and why being heard matters more than just being seen. Frankie has a unique background that blends the high-stakes world of entertainment with the practical demands of corporate leadership. Having wrote the presenter scripts for the Eurovision Song Contest, that's easy for me to say, Frankie knows how to blend clarity and sparkle in high-pressure moments. Frankie's work goes far beyond making other people funny, turning technical experts and leaders into captivating communicators using professional acting, improvisation, and strategies grounded in real-world business and theatre. Frankie's approach is about helping people express ideas with substance and confidence. Her work is about connection, authenticity, and making sure your voice actually lands the way it is supposed to. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since the first time I met Frankie. I love the energy, I love the dynamic, and I love the message that she has. Frankie, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
You're more than welcome, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here. And I love the fact you mentioned connection. Because that is the fundamental reason, isn't it, for communication? Somebody said to me, what's the reason for communication today? I went, what today? Like, or do you mean generally? And he said, no, just generally. Why do we communicate? And I went, firstly, it's connection. Secondly, it's to get the message over. If you don't have the connection, no one's listening to your message.
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting you would mention that right at the very beginning, before we've even gotten to the actual interview portion, because it's something, and I don't know why, it's just been something really, really prevalent for me recently, Frankie, thinking about certain areas where I'm not quite at my best. My energy's kind of low. I'm not really that interested in what it is I'm doing. And then when you are like that, you start to notice that sort of thing in other people. And I had come to the summation that it was connection. Like I'm just not that connected. And what that's done for me is it's helped me have really good conversations with other people to say, well, tell me a wee bit about your connection to this. Like, why are you doing it? You know, what do you hope to get from that? What's the end state? Why this over something else? And just starting to raise awareness in terms of that connection that you're talking about. So I'm sure that's going to be interweaved into everything we're talking about today, but I'm completely with you. It's so fundamentally and foundationally important for everything we're doing from a communication perspective.
And at the risk of diving in the middle, just to extend what you've just said about connection, there's an internal connection that has to be made first.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the reasons why, and I was doing a keynote recently somewhere, and I've had coaching beforehand, and it was very by the book. And I think that when I had the coaching on the presentation, I did it because I wanted to please him. If I'm really truthful about this, I wanted him to say, oh, you're a great communicator, if I'm really honest. But you know what? It didn't work. What worked is what I usually do. That's what would work. That's what would work. And I felt really, really nervous before I presented. And I thought, okay, what advice do I give others? One of the pieces of advice is, what is that telling you? And sometimes it's nothing to do. Very few people get nerves before they present just because they've got nerves. There's usually other stuff going on. Like you've just been given somebody's 77 slides with their message and you don't really understand what the point is. But it could be because you're not in tune with yourself. You're not listening to your voice. Yeah. So is it an internal disconnection that's going on? You put it down, you trivialize it, you don't listen to it.
Yeah. Until the moment of truth where you have a blank, you in some
Hmm.
way misinterpret the message, you go in a different direction or something along those lines. And then as soon as that all happens and then you have your debrief or your post-mortem afterwards or whatever that looks like, you then get to that situation where you're like, I knew that was going to happen. Like I didn't feel myself,
Oh,
all the tools and systems I have for myself, I kind of threw them out. My gut was saying, are you sure about this? Is this exactly what you want to do? And you're kind of like, shh, 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 I've got this. I think this it's worth a try. Invariably, a lot of times it's not.
it's not, no. Or you're like, well, it doesn't matter. Or, I guess that Karen and Bob know what they're doing. And
Yeah,
it's like, voice, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen the red flags. I know where this is going. Oh no, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt.
yeah,
And then you watch a car crash.
yeah, yeah. Where you're driving. Yeah, oh, I like it. I like it, and I mean that's a great sneak peek, folks, into the type and style of conversation we're going to have today. So, as I like to do at the very beginning, Frankie, is just give people a wee bit of an overview of your career in life to date that got you to the point where you said people need my help, they need my counsel, they need my coaching, they need my energy to be able to come in and
Mm.
identify areas where they can be authentically seen, be authentically heard in a way that's genuinely authentic to them and the situation, and how all that manifested itself.
So I have, oh, okay. I hate saying background because it's really the foreground of my life as well, which is the acting. So I left drama school, and then between temping and fringe theatre, which we will call the marriage of arts and voluntary services, and
Yeah,
and I kept on. I'd do that, and then I'd go into a typing job, and I thought, how long is this going to go on for? And then I went back and did a teaching diploma in presentation. And then I got onto a government scheme where you got a loan and £40 a month. So translate that into dollars, i.e., not
oh,
much to live on. And I
yeah,
managed to set up a school. And it was at that time when all these acting schools were setting up and they would promise you the world. And then they'd speak to parents who are cash strapped anyway and make the kids join an agency so they can go on to every, for us in the UK, it was the bill, but it would have
yeah,
been whatever it was in the US, and they were springing up and they were cash cows. So I came along and I thought, I'm going to get the kids from the housing estates. I'm going to get the people that can't afford those places and I'm going to set something up. And it won't be like theirs. It will be teaching acting, and I will get in actors. I'm going to get in stage fighters. I'm going to get in dancers. I'm going to give them all of this. And we won't work towards some massive production. And I was really strict. When people called me up, they went, will they be able to do a big summer production? I want Chloe in a big summer production. And I'm like, Chloe won't be in a big summer production, I'm afraid. However, what she will do is she will learn theatre skills that will help her to communicate, give her confidence, and arm her with life skills. But if you want the production, I can give you some names of schools that do it. No, actually, I want that. And I think in 5 years, I only got one parent who went, no, no, no. Sophie really has to do the production. Mm. And so okay, bye. And then what happened was the parents could see what was happening and they weren't getting enough skills to be able to do their auditions if they wanted to. The parents could see what was happening and they were like, you know what, we could do some of that with some of that. And then from that, I began speech writing for the UN because some of them were involved in these big NGO projects. And then push came to shove because I had a great accountant, except she would look at my spreadsheet and she at that time she was just a spreadsheet and she'd go, oh, you're still in business, well done. And then I had the government giving me £20 every 6 months going, oh, well done. No one was giving me any advice whatsoever. So I thought, bugger this. And I sold the business. And I thought, where shall I go in the world? Turkey. Turkey was a very appealing place. and still is for many reasons. And I went over there, I learned the language, I networked. It was easier for me because I learned the language. And
Yeah.
I met a bloke in a bar who introduced me to somebody who was an agent. And I'd been doing loads of acting work, ironically, more acting work bilingually there in immersive theatre before the word immersive even became a thing. And then I met this guy in a bar, introduced me to an agent who said, there's an actress who is presenting for the Eurovision Song Contest, wants help with her English. And I thought, oh God, English. English is a foreign language. That is future imperfect for me. However, I shall play the game because she's an actress. Never know. You never know, right? It's all about visibility. Turned up and I went, you know what? Let's watch some old Eurovision broadcasts and see where we can make them lighter, more informative, and funny. And I start improvising. She's rolling around on the floor. She's like, you have got to write my script. Future perfect. So now I'm writing the script and I'm directing the the presenters. And I would also like to add, I nearly stopped a war between Greece and Turkey by making them not say certain things that they were saying in the rehearsals. And that was from both sides. There's no one person's fault. But I was told by the Eurovision Broadcasting Association, you shut them up, both of them. Okay, right, fine. And so I did that. So there was a sort of negotiation role that I didn't even expect there. And then I came back to the UK. I worked for a company who were looking for actors to train in business, but also to write courses. So I was doing interview courses, communication and presentation. Then I went off and did NLP. And I thought, oh, I love this. And then I spread my wings because after I did the master NLP, I thought, nah, I'm being boxed in here. I'm going to set up my own company. And then I basically had lots of offerings, then rebranded 4 specific offerings. And they are presentation, influence and communication, and business storytelling. There's also creative problem solving. People go, oh, I've got AI for that. But no, because you still need to walk around problem solving. You can't go to AI all the time. It doesn't solve a lot of problems, as you know, Gary, because of the kind of really knotty stuff that you get. And you have to take into account that person's energy, their needs, their wants. You train you're looking at the unspoken as well. Okay. So Claude is great, but not for everything. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm also writing a show, and I've won, as you said, awards for my comedy. So I'm still doing that. But what I love is that I'm fascinated by the science and the psychology and the performance and how it combines to create a very whole package. So, for example, I was doing work last year with a massive pharmaceutical company in the US, and they wanted improvisers, but they wanted somebody who was able to talk about the scientific basis, the behavioral psychology behind what we were doing, and use improvisation as a way of consolidating behaviors. So I wrote a program for that, and I worked with American and British improvisers and scientists, and we all went over there and did this program, and it was wonderful because it was like a 3D experience. So it worked really well, and I get so much satisfaction out of that, because also, you know what you're doing. And I think it's with this, and I saw it with the theatre school as well. You're giving people a key. They decide how they're going to use it, and they make it their own. They colour it, they hang the bits off it, and they open the door of their choosing. And when they realise they have that ability to do it, it is amazing. It's like the whole, you're giving somebody a holy grail and you're passing it over and you go, make it your own. You decide how to use it. That's yours now. And people are just so elevated because they've realized what they've got. And how much potential they have, and that they can use it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, that's an incredible journey you've been on, but it's so fascinating. You talk about how people are going to use the tools and skill sets and mindsets and mind shifts that you can impart upon them through the work that you do in their own way for their own gains and for whatever values they're trying to satisfy. I was actually chatting with someone else about that very recently, and just about essentially the competitive nature of the self or professional development industry, where some people might take that information and just hold it so close to their chest and say, I'm never going to tell anyone else about this, because if other people have this, then we won't have this competitive advantage anymore. And so from a business development perspective, it becomes quite a difficult thing, because you're going to get a testimonial, but it might not be super prescriptive. And when you do good work, the word might not spread like it would with a fancy new pair of trainers or a TV show that other people should really watch, or however organic things that happen in a marketing perspective. So that, I think what you just said there, Frankie, in terms of this is unique to you. Yes, the curriculum might be the same, the delivery might be very, very similar, but you're going to do something completely wholly unique to you with this information. So don't hesitate to tell other people about it. And I don't say that from
Yeah.
a pure selfish perspective. I mean, I say that you can share your wares without sharing the trade secrets, without in some way disabling your ability to be able to grow or continue to thrive.
You know what? I felt like that until really recently. In fact, actually, I had a coach who told me, I said, if I write a blog every week, I'm going to end up telling everybody everything. So she
Yeah.
went, Frankie, you need to do this, because then people are like, oh, I want to work with you because you get my issues. And that is actually very much what happened. But even recently, I wrote for Mind Tools, for whom I've just written a course on presenting for managers. And I went, don't put the spice rack in the article. You have to take it out right now. And then I thought, what are you doing? Give the spice rack. It's going to save them a day having to read Talk Like Ted. Great book, but I've got it basically on a page. And if I can give that to people, because you know what? Somebody else can give it and they could teach it, but it's not me. So, and I
Exactly.
just thought it's a sign of your own self-respect, if you can, and self-confidence. If you can give something to somebody else and go, it will never be a carbon copy.
Exactly.
You'll do
Yeah.
something which will be brilliant for you and everyone around you.
Yeah.
But the giver needs to have the confidence that they're no less when they give.
Yeah.
However, if there are people out there who are starting off going individually, in my experience, I would be very careful about the phrase pay it forward, especially used on women. Oh no, you can do this for free for our Women in Empowerment organization. Oh, hang on.
Mm.
You're teaching women to empower themselves, but you won't pay me. Do people pay to come to your Women in Empowerment workshops? Yes. Well, you'll have to pay me. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't work like that. It's about paying it forward. You
Yeah. Good point.
know what I'm saying? No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah. Yeah.
careful.
I mean, there's value. You know what? And that's a good one of the things that we chatted about prior to recording was visibility.
Yes.
So that example there, if you make a conscious choice to say, you know what, I have allocated a certain amount of my time for pro bono work that's for the betterment of the causes or organizations that I support. That's a different story than someone saying, this is a newbie, we could probably get him or her for free, and they would be delighted because we're going to give them a platform that they didn't have before. So in the conversation we were having about visibility,
Yeah.
you'd told me about some of the more tougher moments of your life that you navigated on an accelerated way because you had already established a certain level of visibility, and you were more congruent with yourself and communicating
Yeah.
what you were doing, where you're at, and how you're doing. Tell us a bit more about that.
So when I started off my business, so I left the original company that I was with as soon as I left Turkey. When I came back from Turkey, I was working with this company and then set up my own business. But I had this clause where I couldn't take any of their clients, even if they wanted to. I mean, I wasn't actually doing what some people do, which is actively chasing them. They were
Yeah.
trying to trace me down because they wanted to work with me again. I mean, these were massive energy companies going, no, we want her to do a project. And they go, no, she's left and we don't know where she is. So they were tracking me down to work with me. But I was bound by this contract to which I kept too, which meant for a while I had a total lack of income, and it was terrifying because I had to make certain arrangements in order to get through that time. But once I had done that, the old Maslow's hierarchy, got the living sorted out, and I had to go and get a part-time job because, actually it was a full-time job at that point, which I kept for a couple of years because they allowed me to take time off to do these massive projects. And one of the things that I was doing is I was phoning around for speaking opportunities. Because when I speak, I'll get people that come up to me and go, oh, I want you to work with me. Now, I would do it in many of those situations. It was for free, but it was for free because they gave me the client list or they were doing publicity for me and it was the right demographic. So
Yeah.
to anybody out there who is in that situation, just be very discretionary. See, what are you getting out of it? If you just want to practice speaking in public or getting out there, that's also a very valid reason. But
Yeah.
I would question some people's how can I say, guise of doing good is actually a hypocrisy. So, and it doesn't sit well with me. So, especially when I was scrabbling around as I was. And I was phoning up people that I had worked with. And I'd say, look, I can't work with you now, but here is some free stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So, again, a really simple way of saying, I'm still here. And, out of sight is out of mind. Somebody else will be stepping in. They'll do a workshop at work with somebody and they'll go, oh, that's interesting. So, you really want to make sure. But sometimes it doesn't work quite like that, but they might recommend you to somebody else. But I have found that it is actually a lot simpler than having to organize events. Ringing people up and finding out how they are and not waiting till you need something. And I find that easy because I keep in touch with people with my clients, and I like them as people. So actually, and I always think, oh, I could learn something from them. Find out what
Yeah.
they're doing, what the challenges are, how they're overcoming them. And I keep in touch with people I like, that they're not drains. So
Yeah.
it's a joy anyway. I remember getting one massive job and I've just been keeping in touch with them for 5 years.
Yeah.
Now, if you're only going to do it because it's transactional, you'd probably give up sooner. And
Yeah.
that's fair enough because some of your relationships might be purely transactional. But if I wouldn't do it because I just think life's too short. I just want good people in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting you say that. I did a newsletter recently, and in the newsletter was around, basically the first line was something along the lines of "Be careful who you let in," or something like
Oh,
that. But the actual first line of the body of the text was, "I don't have a lot of arseholes in my life," and as I start to look around, I would think, like, how it wouldn't have been super intentional when I was younger, I don't think, because you're kind of thrown into various situations, and proximity is a big thing in that, where you kind of don't get to choose and such. And then, but the older I get, like I actually would struggle right now to even think of, and I'm not saying that I don't have any at all in my life, but in terms of circles of, you know, of relationship or intimacy and intimacy of relationship, and the circles going out, they are at the edge, so they only get in if I decide they get in, or in case of some other circumstance. So it's really, really interesting that those types of styles of conversations that you were just describing there, Frankie, is exactly the type of styles of conversations I've been having, because I'm just interested. And the one key thing you said there was, I wonder what I can learn from this person. So it might just be something cool that they're doing, or a new thing they've just discovered, and then you would maybe they just finished a book or an
Mm.
article or something where they're saying, by the way, I was actually just thinking about you. You should check this thing out. And then, but having that vulnerability to saying, even if this is a client, and typically the transaction, to use that word again, is, I'm going to teach you things that are going to help you out. Everyone is everyone's teacher and student at the same time. So in terms of that vulnerability, is that something that you naturally do? Is it something that you have worked on in the past? And is that something that's part of your teachings as well, to say visibility and vulnerability are intertwined at certain points, and here is how you can use them to the benefit of yourself and others?
Right. Now, I find that a fascinating question, because the word vulnerability, and maybe it's because I've shifted how I see being vulnerable. So, which part of this context would you say is vulnerable, Gary?
In terms of what you just described,
In terms of what you've just said. So, what is vulnerable here?
the vulnerability would be to say, I am reaching out to you, and I am more than open to learning something from you, even if the dynamic is, Gary can help me. Gary always helps me. Gary
Yeah.
is the person. Whereas I'm saying, and it's like every class or every talk or every coaching session I ever have, I come away with a nugget, at least one nugget of something where I'm thinking, when I heard that said out loud, that's actually a thing that I should concentrate more on, or I've stopped doing that, and I should.
Okay.
So that
Right.
level of, maybe it's not vulnerability, maybe it's humility or curiosity or something along those lines. I just had the kind of vulnerability in my head there, just in terms of, you had some sticky moments in your life where you didn't seem to compromise who you were as a person, but you used that visibility and vulnerability. I could just imagine having a conversation with you at that point, honestly, based on our interactions, where you would say, kind of down on my luck right now. Things aren't exactly the
Yeah.
way that they were supposed to be. So if you hear of anything, or if you've got any guidance or advice or anything, if you've been through something similar, I would be more than happy to hear it. And that would just be back to the word we talked about at the very beginning. That would be such a great connection to have with them. And I think that's really where the vulnerability part came from.
Right. Now I get it. So, the vulnerability, it's interesting because I remember being on my NLP course and somebody said, "Oh, you always rebut with humor." And I went, "Oh, because maybe I'm rebutting you right now because I know you're going to judge me." So, it's a pushback here. But,
Yeah.
but I have, I find that I actually have to be very selective with whom I'm vulnerable. But when the connection is right, it's not hard. That's why, that's why I got confused there, because I thought having to work at being vulnerable. And then so what do you mean by vulnerable? Because I
Yeah.
didn't understand how you have to work at it. I think, um, but I think when there's a connection, so I have a connection with a client who I only met last year, and it's such a wonderful, open sort of dynamic. It's become a friendship, and
Yeah,
we're both navigating certain similar situations at the moment. And she opened up a lot to me. And there was just a gentle opening where I test it, to be honest, I do. I think when I reflect back on it, I remember going for a walk with her and it was on a Sunday. She said, let's go out on a Sunday. And I remember thinking, well, that's not very professional. But I thought I'm now in that kind of a friend zone.
yeah,
So, and then as we were walking, because I enjoy being with her anyway, and we were talking about something, it was a very safe way of, it's like discretionary declaration, which is what I always say to people to do when you're networking, because you're testing how much you can trust a person, but you're
yeah,
not telling them your innermost secrets. And she's quite exceptional because she's like not put off by emotion, which is, so it feels really safe. Whereas I've got another client who we have been, I'd say, I don't know, friends, but friendly for, gosh, years, maybe 9 years now. And I don't tell him what I'm going through, but I dig to find out what he's going through because I know that I'm going to learn from him.
yes,
So I measure it because I'm not quite sure, even after 9 years with him, whether he would want to have, because listen, I still came into his life as the trainer. And so there is an unspoken agreement with a coach or a trainer that you're the coach. You are, it's not above or below or anything, but that you are that person for them.
yes,
There's a tacit agreement. And if you misjudge that vulnerability, and I think it's the same internally in a company with a boss who you feel really, really comfortable with, or even with a colleague, because you could get promoted above them and the trouble starts.
yeah,
You really need to work out whether it would it be misinterpreting the roles, the tacit roles, if you then breached it by with a manifestation of another part of yourself that would never be part of that unspoken professional contract.
yeah. Yeah, I mean there's so much to that, and if we go back to the communication for connection, or connection being the foundation of the communication, there's certain ways that people will connect, and certain ways of that are going to land with certain relationships that you have, and other ways that aren't going to land. And I
Mm,
think that there was certainly, talking about testing and talking about, am I breaching this tacit agreement
yeah.
by even considering going down this route? Then if you have that conversation with clarity, you can then make the best decision and of the moment. But one thing I wanted to ask you was, you do a lot of work around presence, around visibility, around business communication. There are patterns with human beings, and there are patterns with human being behavior.
Mm.
And when you have that in the professional realm, and a lot of the stuff that we do kind of sprinkles into the private life as well. But
Oh,
with
and how?
the confines being, we're getting paid to talk about it from a professional perspective, but it's not just exclusive to that. What do you see being the common patterns to barriers for people trying to communicate their clarity to create that connection?
Right. Well, I was working actually with a techie today, and he I thought, oh, it's great I'm speaking to Gary tonight because without naming names, he embodies a lot of the challenges, and he and his team who are um, engineers in finance. One of
Right.
the issues is, how do I make my point clearly? often this is how they think. I'm on the defense. I feel that I have to justify something. My manager says what's going on, and I just feel like I need to protect myself rather than give an update. They waffle, they get defensive, they're overly apologetic. They're just thinking that they're going to be on the thin end of the wedge. They don't speak up in meetings. And there's something I think in common with America as well as the UK, that we don't know how to be necessarily speak our truth in a way that somebody needs to hear it. So you either don't say anything, sound passive aggressive, or it just blurts out in the wrong way. So you've got the unclarity, you've got this mismatched intention, you don't know how to make your point, so you waffle on or just don't make it. So there's this whole thing around messaging. And then there's something about influence, because people overlook you. They're humble. They are, they're in the machine room, but they still want to be recognized. And they think the competency is enough to have them recognized, and then get disappointed when it's not. They get overlooked. They don't get the pay rise. And, influence starts way before you need something. So he had done a presentation for which I'd prepared him. And I said, did it go well? He went, yeah, unusually. And I went, unusually? He went, well, it was unusual because I started to get all these emails and Slack messages which said, oh, you've done really well. That was a great presentation. I went, and that's not normal. He went, no, not here. I went, this is interesting. I said, because I've just thought of a very quick way that you can really sort of stick out amongst other people, but in a really good way, and like to manage up. He went, what? And I went, look, right, people aren't doing that a lot in this company after a presentation. No, they're not. I went, do your managers ever give presentations? And they, yeah. So next time you hear something that they say, or you like the way they've said something, you're going to write them a quick email, and you're going to say, let's just say it was, I don't know, Sanja. So, dear Sanja, I really loved what you said there about using AI in this specific way, because I hadn't actually thought of that. So I'm going to see if I can apply it this week. Thanks again for your presentation. Best regards. That's all you need to do, because what you're doing is you are priming them. It's firstly you're managing up by telling your managers the kind of information that you want them to impart to you, without being declarative, without being commanding or demanding. You're saying, this is great, do more of it. So you're showing your manager or your leaders how to lead. Also, wow, you've given them a pat on the back without sounding patronizing. And they'll remember that. And when you actually appear at their desk, they won't be looking up like they do with a lot of people, which I came across last week in a company, where they look up. This is the automatic response in this particular department that I was working out last week by other managers. They look up and they go, okay, what do you want? Because I've only got 5 minutes. And the guy that told me this, he said, that's because, he said, they're not doing what you're doing, what you told us to do, rather. They just go up to the manager whenever they want something. And so now, as soon as they come, I mean, we know that person. I mean, we know friends in our life who've been like that. It's like, oh, you're ringing me up. Okay, what do you want? Right, wait for it. You're bracing yourself. And it's that person that you were chatting to, who you had a laugh with. They're the one who you'll be more likely. You don't actually have to make an intellectual weighing up a decision to work out, do I have the time? Can I be bothered? Do I really want to speak to so-and-so about that? It's like, oh, of course I will, Gary.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much, once again, so much to what you just said there. And it was like three answers in one. And, talking about the influence factor, talking about the micro feedback and,
Mm.
and what I say to people, and I've said on my socials and such in times gone past, when you give someone a compliment about something, it's not just for them, it's for you. It's because it feels good to say that. And even if the person doesn't get back or gets back with a dry answer or something, that wasn't why I was doing it. It feels good to be able to look for those things. So instead of feedback becoming this scary monster that, if someone says, can I give you some feedback? And then all of a sudden you've got a knot in your stomach and your sweaty
No.
palms and you're kind of thinking, oh, I don't even know what's coming here. If you can start to make feedback a literal part of your life and saying, I'm going to point out as much as I can and not just really good job on the presentation, but as you said there, a layer deeper, maybe two, to say, the reason I enjoyed it was that you said this and I hadn't thought about it in that way. Therefore, based on your influence, I am going to try this thing this week. And then that person's interest might be piqued. And they'll be saying the next again week, hey Frankie, just double checking. Did you try that? You say, actually, I just did. I just finished it and it worked out way better than I thought. Connection to bring it
Connection
full
and
circle,
affirmation as well. Because that
Yeah.
person's like, oh, I'm a good leader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it works both ways. And another
Yeah.
really simple way of doing that is asking people for their advice. And there is
Yes.
a body of research which backs this up. And it says, and interestingly, what happens when you ask somebody for advice, they regard you as not less competent, but more competent for a pile of reasons, such as, oh, they're clever enough to ask for my advice. I mean, that's one thing. Obviously, don't go up to the CIO and say, I can't switch the computer on. Does that count,
Yeah.
Frankie? No. But it has to be obviously, um, you know, a reasonable request for
Yeah.
advice, not something
Contextual.
which is
Yeah.
incredibly obvious. But it's a very easy way to approach somebody, and you can do it online. So, for example, even if you're working in a dispersed team, you could say, I heard from Mikhail that you are doing such and such. I'd be really fascinated to have 5 minutes with you because I'm thinking of setting up something and I'd just like to know how to go about it from someone who has been through it successfully. And
Yeah.
again, I'm giving a really concrete reason why I'm asking somebody for their advice. If I just say, oh, I just thought I'd speak to you because you're on the org chart and therefore you would know, they're like, well, go and find another org chart.
Yeah. 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 And it's such sage advice. And it's really from the school of you genuinely have access to more resources than you think you do if you just gain a bit of I keep saying clarity, but I mean, it's genuinely that to say there are certain benefits and drawbacks, but benefits to working in a company because it's a group of people that are aligned in some way to deliver a product, service, or result, or whatever it is the company is there for. So there's resources to tap into, and the more that you genuinely dialogue with them on a variety of different levels, the more you get that connection, the more you get that influence, the more you learn, the more you can then start to really just tap into all the resources that you've got.
So when people are working in a company, Gary, I always go, God, what a fantastic! You've got a whole web of contacts. This is your next
Yeah,
job or your next
yeah,
role, and they're like, "Yeah, but I don't know how." And when I've been working in academia, I do something which is quite unusual. Do you want to hear it?
I really do.
brace yourself, Gary.
I'm
I
sitting
go and
there.
speak to other people in other departments.
I don't think that would work.
A lot of people don't do that. And it's dead simple. And it's actually why I was working in a department where they were doing cutbacks. And I was the last one in through the door. And it's the reason why that manager she stopped speaking to me. She blanked me because another department nabbed me. And she said, "You were the last one of my team in." I went, "Yeah, but nobody goes to talk to anybody else." "Yeah, but you didn't deserve the job because you were the last one in." And I went, "Oh, grow up." And she just, whatever. And I got that job because I was working in so, this is job security, and it can
Yeah.
work the other way. So, for example, I have a client. I told him not to take the job. I said, there's just so many red flags. It's like a Grand Prix race. I know all I'm seeing is red flags. He took me out for dinner. He said, "You train me in interview techniques. I'm so good. I'm getting jobs that I'm not sure I want anymore." And I went, "Okay, cool. Right. So let's see. Why don't you want it?" Anyway, it was like there was a whole awful power dynamic in the interview. I went, "Warning, warning, that's going to seep through to everybody in the team. It's classic drama triangle stuff."
Yeah.
Anyway, so he took the job. 2 years later, people resigned. There was unbelievable amounts of bullying, like online, in person, bitching, senior team bitching, doing snide typing with other people on calls. I mean, it was like being in a playground. It was disgusting.
Yeah.
And, people were signing off ill and sick. And one of the people that had persecuted my client suddenly gets on LinkedIn. "Oh, I've heard that you've gone as well. Jared," fake name, obviously, Jared. So I wondered if, you might consider, working, consider me for any opportunities that come up." And Jared just told him to do one. 2
Yeah.
words. 2 words. Right? I won't swear because you have to get busy with bleeping on a podcast. But,
Yeah.
I think everybody knows what he said. And
Yeah.
he chooses his words very diplomatically, does my client. But, you get what you deserve.
Yeah.
This man made a lot of people very sick.
Mm.
And you burn your bridges, you get a reputation. And I've
Yeah.
heard loads of stories like that. And you might get, that person might get another job, but there were a whole load that he's not getting because people are warning their HR, "Oh, so you work with this person. Don't go there. Don't."
Yeah.
And I know a lot of that that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's what did you expect? What did you expect was going to happen? And it
Yeah,
doesn't seem
exactly.
that many people have had that conversation with that person to say, this is how your behaviour is so out of order, so unprofessional, so destructive. And if you keep doing that, I talked recently about levels, and people are really scared about the impact or influence of AI, that people will get, they'll accelerate their career, in a way that isn't deserving of their attitude, of their mindset, of the professionalism, of the skill set, of the talents.
Mm.
And I said, it will eventually level itself out. So you might, if you're living a comparative life, you might look at them and say, no way that person's managed to do that, and they're doing it on the back of AI. But ultimately, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, you can't have AI to make a decision in the moment based on dynamic circumstances that are going on,
Mm.
and everything eventually levels its way out. So this toxic person is eventually going to be where I think you said where he is deserved to be, and the levels will eventually, karmatic influence will come in, and the levels will level themselves out essentially. So it's
Yeah. I mean, you see people buy into a toxic narrative because everyone's behaving like that. Now,
yeah,
okay, fine. If you're completely short-term and myopic, fine. But, once you're gone, then
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, so much rich guidance and advice you provided today, Frankie. Frankie, as you know, this is called the Best You podcast, and what I like to do is take an opportunity to ask every guest what's one regular practice that Frankie employs to give you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself
Ooh.
each and every day.
So I was giving this a good think, and I was going to rebut and go, well, which version of me is the best self? And then I had a good old think. And you know what? Morning pages. Writing 3 blank sides of paper at some point in the morning, the old Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. Oh my gosh, that whole book was amazing. And the
Yeah,
practice of the morning pages, that's number one. Sometimes I can't do the morning pages, but I don't kick myself. Well, one thing that I also do is walk in nature. I love that.
right.
And we know that makes us more creative. So I go into a problem solving mode. Just quite free. It's freeing, your brain free reels. And I just feel that I'm always trying to weigh things up and I'm working things out, but there's a more freewheeling nature to walking. And there was a Stanford study about 20 minutes of walking to help creative thinking. But if we think of creative thinking as just like it's an unknotting. It's when you've got this horrible knot and it just goes and unravels by itself
Yeah,
quite freely.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. You know, it's interesting. I did a social media post quite some time ago where I talked about if I talked about compounding, and compounding can be positive or negative. You could get off to a bad start, and it just progressively gets worse because you're trying to fix it, or you're trying to fight it, or in some way you're trying to correct it, or
Mm.
just even lean into it a bit more. And certainly from a positive perspective, you got off to a good start with 3 pages, and then you've got a situation where the day just compounds in and of itself. But the point being that if you have that spiral of doom, or that epiphany moment, and you're shooting for the stars, that many people absorb themselves in the moment, enjoy it, take the benefit of it, or try and get out of it as quickly as possible, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
And then they just leave the scene of the learning without taking the learning. And if you start to think about, just from a pure compounding perspective, why was that day, that meeting with that client, that interview, that podcast, and guest, that ride, like whatever it was, why was that so good? What was my sleep pattern in the days leading up to it? What was my diet? Who did I actually hang out with? How many
Yes,
times did I
isn't
go and
that
walk in
true?
nature?
Mm.
And we just kind of go ace, and then we move on. And sometimes we'll really look at the bad stuff and say, right, we have to avoid that. That was awful. How do we actually do that? But there's absolute lessons in both of those things. So, I say that almost as an offering at the end to give you something back, that you've been so kind and generous with your time and such today. So before I let you go, Frankie, where can people find out more about you and the services that you provide?
FrankieKemp.com. It's all there in a 15-minute discovery call. So get in touch. The discovery call is absolutely free. And under tips and tools, that's the blog. And I've got tons of stuff there on communication, creative thinking, presentations, interview technique. And I'd love to hear from people. So Frankie Kemp with an IE, KEMP.com.
I love it. I was looking forward to this one. I knew that it was going to be absolutely dynamite. Thank you very much for everything you've shared, for your energy, and for your camaraderie today. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show.
I've loved it, Gary. You're so easy to speak to for a start. It's great.